Hi, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and we couldn't be happier to host the 4th annual Insight Jam. I want to thank everyone who's participating this week, as well as our Insight Jam sponsors, DataStax, Monte Carlo, Denodo, HighGear, and Seller Data. I also want to thank our Solutions Review editors and staff for pulling this event together. When we started this in 2019, we wanted to take a moment at the end of the year to celebrate enterprise technology with a social media event offering best practices and predictions. This will be our biggest jam ever, including 16 live-streamed expert panel discussions over 4 days. And we intend to keep the insights flowing in 2023 with the launch of an expert subscription site for any tech professional who wants to publish posts on Solutions Review. Again, thank you all for being here and enjoy the Insight Jam.
Solutions Review presents Insight Jam, a social media celebration of enterprise technology. Hello and welcome back to day 2 of the Insight Jam. I'm Jonathan Paul, the Director of Multimedia here at Solutions Review, and today's focus has been on data protection and disaster recovery. So for our third panel of the afternoon, we brought in 6 experts to discuss the evolution of enterprise storage, past, present, and future. We have a group of 6 gentlemen coming to us from across the globe, and I am excited to get this topic underway. And we're going to start with the introductions. Demetrius, you've graciously agreed to be our moderator today. So let's start with you. 60 seconds or so, a bit about your background and what brings you to this topic today.
Absolutely. So good morning, good afternoon, and also good evening. So my name is Demetrius Malbrough, and I am the founder and also CEO of Data Protection Gumbo. And I have over 20 years of experience in backup and recovery and also the data protection industry. And I also run a podcast also named Data Protection Gumbo as well. So super excited to lead this panel and also have a fantastic conversation with the rest of the panelists. All right, so why don't we go with Justin?
Hi, happy holidays, everybody. My name is Justin Emerson. I'm a principal technology evangelist with Pure Storage.
That was short and sweet. Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Herzog, CMO of Infinidat. And yes, this is my Southern California bleach blonde. I have been in the storage business for almost 40 years, working both large enterprise storage companies such as Senior VP at EMC, CMO at IBM Storage, and CMO at Maxtor and Seagate, but also 7 startups. So we're here to talk about what's happened throughout the eons of storage. And trust me, it's exciting, never changing, and storage is cool. Back to you, Demetrius.
I really like that introduction, Eric. Sabaya, why don't you give us a brief introduction as well?
Thank you very much, Demetrius. Again, this is Subaya Sundaram. I work for Haiku. I run products at Haiku. I've also been in the industry a long time, like Eric, probably not as long as Eric, but I've worked for companies like NetApp, EMC, Veritas, Data Gravity, and so on. So the variety of companies in the space. Very happy to be here because, like Eric, I've seen the evolution of our technology and some of the new challenges I love to hear from customers, and that's something I would love to share and hear what the other panelists have to say. We at Haiku focus on multi-cloud and look forward to that.
Awesome, and good to see you again, Sabaya. Also, Asan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Demetrius. This is Asan Siddiqui, Director of Product Management at Arcserve. I've been in the data protection storage space for about 18 years now with CA and Arcserve. And Arcserve, as some of you may know, is one of the most experienced data protection vendors out there, starting from the NetWare era till date, providing solutions for storage, data protection appliances, software, and SaaS. And I'm happy to be here with this amazing panel and with Insight Jam with this awesome audience. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Asan. And last but not least, Doran.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Doran Youngerwood. I'm the VP of Marketing at a company called Continuity. Continuity was founded by a team of storage and data protection experts. So my role within that is I blend the worlds of storage and security. I spend a lot of time meeting with both the infrastructure side of the business and also the CISOs and the security folks. and of course with market analyst firms. But one of the other things I do, like Demetrius, is I founded about a year ago a video series called CISO Point of View. I interview a number of CISOs, and a big focus for the video series is to understand from the CISO's perspective what they're doing with all the things storage, backup, data protection. And likewise, I look at it from the infrastructure perspective to understand what are they doing to secure their own environments as well. So great to be here.
All right, Doron, looks like I messed your name up there, so I promise I won't do it again. Welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started and jump right into the questions. And so since we are here to discuss the past, present, and future of the evolution of data storage, why don't we start off by going over what are some of the major changes in the enterprise data storage industry that you've seen over the past 10 years. And why don't we start with you, Eric, since you have the most gray hair, as you mentioned.
Well, thank you very much. So there's been a lot of change. The one thing that's consistent in enterprise storage, it's always bigger, faster, better, cheaper. Always, every generation. When we had 7,200 RPM hard drives, people said, whoa, that's fast. Then 10,000 RPM drives. Ooh, that's even faster. 15,000 RPM. Ooh, that's even faster. Then flash. And who knows what comes after flash. But the point being is there are certain things that are always consistent. Things that have been dramatic changes in the last 10 years. One, the importance of storage as being critical in a company's cybersecurity strategy. And by the way, many CISOs still don't see it that way. Even the CIOs often don't see it that way. But remember, all data on this planet in any company, big, medium, or small, is sitting on storage somewhere. The second, of course, is the impact of the cloud. And I don't mean just public cloud, hybrid clouds, private clouds, all various types of clouds are used. So I'd say that those are really the biggest things that I've seen. And then lastly, on the infrastructure side, of course, is the rise of the all-flash storage subsystem, the all-flash array. So those are three things the last 10 years that had the biggest impact on pretty much every enterprise, no matter where they are globally, and even all the way down to the small companies like Herzog's Bar and Grill.
So if I were to add to what Demetrius, if I were to add to what Eric said,
Sure.
One of the things I observe is that the storage is, every system is getting more and more intelligent. I mean, that's one thing there, because everybody has enough compute, enough power, things like that. They want to add more value. So the big part is that everything what Eric said, plus their intelligence is continuously growing, and that is something. I know it used to be only in the expensive storage you used to get some of those capabilities. Right now, you pretty much get all those capabilities and across the entire line, from all the way from your early stage entry-level storage all the way to the top, as well as in the public clouds. That is something I see the whole stack there, definitely.
And I think one of the things about trying to derive value from all of this data, right? The reason that we're looking to machines and systems to derive value from all this data or analyze all this data is because we're creating data now at a much faster speed. We're creating data at the speed of machines, not at the speed of humans. 10 years ago, even an entry in a database was probably related to some transaction that was kicked off by a human. But today, the vast majority of data is actually not, there's no human in the chain of custody at all. It's data that's being created by sensors or by analytics engines and so forth. And so that's what's creating this explosion of data. And so the challenges around scale and the challenges around how do I actually analyze this data and find value from it, that's really the major big difference from my perspective.
To add to Justin and the wonderful introduction from Eric and Subaya, I think not just the speeds are going up, the capacity is going up, but the value of data is really going up significantly. A lot of business decisions, day-to-day life today is driven by data. It's becoming the lifeblood of every organization, no matter how small, how big you are, which industry. The data that you generate helps drive your future business. All the past data, all the analytics, and all the information is so necessary today that without that, companies can come to a crawling stop. And so the value of protecting that data, preserving that data, being able to recover it, that's gone up exponentially and it will only go up further in the future.
Awesome. And so let's take a step back and kind of sit and understand exactly where we are today with some of the challenges that we're dealing with, like the macroeconomic headwinds and inflation. And we're seeing tons of layoffs in the tech industry, et cetera. And it seems that budgets are being slashed, et cetera. And why don't you kind of lay the land for me, or give us a layout of exactly what do you think are driving, I guess, some of those decisions around maybe cutting costs, and also just around, making sure that budgets are efficient, et cetera. But how does data storage play into that? Are you seeing CIOs or CISOs also maybe slash the budget when it comes to data storage, or are you not, because data is just everywhere and it's continually growing? Why don't we start off with you, Justin? Do you mind answering that one first?
Well, I think that data is not going to get any less important. In fact, if companies are trying to figure out how do we reduce cost, one of the largest costs is always going to be people. And part of the push towards these advanced analytics and machine learning and AI and all this stuff is how do we get machines to do things that in the past we thought that humans might be required to. And so data is the engine for all of that. And so I don't think that we're going to see a major slowdown in storage spending per se, but I do think that we're going to see organizations reevaluate some of the decisions they may have made around storage, and may look at an opportunity to say, how do we reduce ongoing costs? Because that may be where they see the most pressure. And so I think there'll probably be sort of a reevaluation, but I don't necessarily see that there's going to be a pullback in storage. I think people are going to look at storage data and the analysis of that data as a way to reduce cost in the long term.
Okay, I appreciate that. Does anyone else want to jump in?
Yes, I want to add to what Justin was talking about. Data is critical. The question is that there's a constant, as Eric said, there's an evolution of storage all the time, right? The biggest thing for customers is that one thing, if for sure, cost is going up. The amount of money they spend on data is going up. The constant thing they always think is how to reduce cost. The kind of thing which I am hearing from customers from a cost perspective, because IT budgets, they always question, right? Especially in the infrastructure space, they always question saying, how do you keep it low? The areas where I hear from customers are, for example, how to leverage the cloud, because at least there's a clear promise that the cost will be lower. So the question is, can we do that? That's something there. The second one is, even within the on-prem infrastructure, trying to see what data to keep where. That's the other thing. So that's one of the reasons, the way I think of is that customers are looking at saying how to make the data mobile so that they can actually make sure they can keep the cost as efficient as possible. So that's a constant thing. It's only thing is the economy accelerates a lot further.
Demetrius, let me chime in a little bit.
Sure.
What we're seeing is, just like Justin is, a more intense analysis of what they spend. Let's face it, while we all love storage, we're storage people, the CIO hates it. Okay, I've met at least 5,000 CIOs in 40 years, big, medium, and small. Never met one that used to be a storage admin or backup admin. Not one. Not one. So while they know they need it, they hate it. So they're always thinking about, how can I cut my capital expenditure, my operational expenditures, my IT operations resource needs around storage. So that does mean, as Justin pointed out, a stricter analysis of what goes on. How do I cut costs? How does the cloud fit in? Many people can tell you that right now, especially in the high-end enterprise for highly transactional workloads, there's a move for repatriation of data off of clouds. They tried it in the cloud. If it's highly transactional, they go, 4 nines by default. If I want 5, 6, 7, I got to pay extra for that. Certain amount of performance. I got to pay extra for that. Certain amount of ease of use. Got to pay for that. And by the way, highly transactional databases, the data is moving back and forth all the time. So the network fees are astronomical. Many enterprises have sat there with a spreadsheet and actually sat there and calculated it out and go, whoa, putting it back on-prem in a hybrid cloud is the right thing to do. Backup and archive, like what Ashen does, that's an exception. There's no doubt that backup and archive pays in the public cloud. But when you're looking at highly transactional workloads and even medium transactional, and you sit there with a spreadsheet, But I do agree with Justin. Everyone is doing more and more analysis. And I would argue that while there isn't a real slowdown, several companies have guided down in the storage space that are public. One of them even pointed out they're on a hiring freeze. One pointed out this coming quarter to a -5. Now that's for the overall company that does more than storage, but that probably includes storage too. So I would say that there are more headwinds than people realize. But what that does mean is that the end users are spending more and more time really evaluating what they're doing before they decide what they're going to buy, how they're going to buy it, and how they're going to consume it. Is it going to be as a service? Is it going to be fully traditional? Should I buy it and depreciate it? What should I do? So I think those are things that fit in on where the world is right now today.
And so, Eric, you jumped ahead a little bit on me there, but I was trying to stay, in the past, but you catapulted us into the future. So why don't we just go ahead and talk about cloud and also, I guess, some of the difference, because a workload is a workload, right? And an application is an application, but it does make a difference where that particular application or that workload is running. So the question is, how is protecting workloads on premises different or the same as protecting workloads in the cloud? Does anyone want to, Sabaya, you jump?
I can probably start. Happy to do that. So with regards to, there is a general assumption, a lot of people think, to your point, as you started, Dimitri, a lot of people think, oh, backup is backup. It doesn't matter where the data is. One thing I'll tell you is that we find it sometimes surprising that a lot of customers are assuming that as soon as you go to cloud, magically the data is protected. As we all know, that's not the case. That's one thing. At the end of the day, it's a shared responsibility. The customer still owns the responsibility. That's there. The second one I probably would say is that wherever you are, there is intelligence in the platforms you are using, be it the on-prem infrastructure or the public cloud infrastructure or the storage, everything has intelligence. The question is that how do people leverage it? That's a very important thing, because at the end of the day, the thing about backup should be transparent, be there, but not impact any of the applications. That's there, right? It should be available, always be on, always be protected. But when you need the data, it should be available. And the data recovery should be so simple. That's the key thing. That applies across the board, be it on-prem or the public cloud. One thing the public cloud has actually done is that it has forced the simplicity conversation into customers, especially as they're going to public cloud. They realize they cannot carry the same baggage they had on-prem onto the public cloud. That's where the adoption of SaaS style, data protection as a service, definitely is there, and that's something we see quite often from customers.
And Doron, do you mind jumping in on that one? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. So one thought that comes to mind is I think it's important not to confuse data resilience with data protection. So if you use a cloud provider to host some or all of your workloads, don't necessarily assume that it means they also offer adequate protection of your data. These providers often plan for data resilience, not necessarily data protection. So that means that the cloud provider's data center environment has been designed to tolerate failure. So for example, if a provider's storage system goes down, then practices like data mirroring and redundant hardware might allow the same data to become available on another system. However, data resilience is different from data protection. For certain use cases like the one I just mentioned, data resilience might ensure the same primary data becomes available shortly after the event. But what it does not do is protect the primary data from being altered or corrupted or accidentally deleted. And that's where data protection tools come in. So instead of having just resilient copies of your data protection tools can provide a safe and unchangeable secondary copy of your data from a previous point of time. So I think it's important that you talk to your cloud provider, understand what guarantees they make in their SLAs. Unless you're working with a provider that specializes in cloud-based backup and recovery services, and you may find the cloud provider doesn't go as far as you think to protect your data the way you would protect it on-prem.
Yeah, lots of people with not a lot of experience in cloud potentially may think that cloud is just like your on-prem data store. But one of the ways I'd heard it described that I thought was really insightful is your resources in the cloud are effectively infinite, but unreliable. And people are used to your on-prem infrastructure being finite, but we build sort of resiliency and reliability into that. So don't expect all of the same characteristics or all the same levels of protection from an application in the cloud. And that's why people design applications for the public cloud very differently than they do on-prem.
Anyone else want to jump in, or I can actually add to that one, because I think, Justin, you just mentioned something about design, and so it just brings me to architecture. Does anyone have any recommendations just around maybe the redesigning of an architecture, especially when you are looking at data storage? What are some of the things that you should be looking at when you are considering designing and architecting just an overall storage environment, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud? Can anyone jump in and maybe talk about that a little bit?
Data storage.
So one of the things I'll tell you from not from a data storage perspective, is what I see from a customer adoption in the public cloud itself, right?
Mhm.
I would add to what Justin was saying. The thing in the public cloud, once the people start consuming, the big thing in public cloud is that its ease of adoption is one of the big values, right? People love that. The thing about, because it's ease of adoption, the big thing is that customers suddenly the consumption suddenly explodes at any point in time. It also goes up and down. That's something there. A big part which people then have to plan for, if that's the phase in which rapid rise or possible fall of this particular one, as well as like what Eric said, if there is repatriation, you got to make sure the storage you're designing in the public cloud or on-prem is also going to be scaling up and down along with that. The data backup services you're going to use are also being able to up and down going along with that particular one. If you have to constantly resize and doing a big exercise about doing all the management stuff, then you will essentially slow down your entire company. That is something you want to constantly think of.
People really like the public cloud because of how you can instantly scale up, the accessibility. It's really about the immediacy of getting resources that people like. And so if we're thinking about how are people re-architecting things, I think the way that the cloud operates is affecting how people are designing their own data centers. And they're trying to figure out, how can I make on-prem infrastructure more service-oriented, much like the way it is in the public cloud? Because if that's the reason why people are moving there, there may be good reasons, other than that, to move to the cloud, but there may be organizations that say, I would rather keep all this stuff on-prem. How do I provide a cloud-like experience? That's why the cloud is not necessarily a place, but it's more of a method of consumption.
Yeah, I would agree with Justin. That's why you have things like what I call private clouds. They mimic the public cloud. Certain companies in the Fortune 1000 and certainly many government agencies, particularly those related to taxation, security, et cetera, won't use public clouds, but they copy what the public cloud does so they can provide the same level of services. And in fact, one of the things you see, part of the rise of storage as a service from vendors such as myself and Justin, is storage as a service basically gives you that cloud-like consumption model without being in the cloud. You can use it with a private cloud, by the way, but it gives you that cloud-like consumption model. Price goes up, goes down every month. What you use, you pay for. What you don't use, you don't, just like in the cloud. Yet you have the security and the confidence. At the same time, you look at your private cloud. In the old days, it would all be VMware-based. Now it's container-based. Okay, you want to make sure, for example, you support Red Hat Ansible, because the DevOps guys don't know squat about storage. And trust me, when the DevOps guy blows up the storage system, guess who gets fired? The storage admins, not the DevOps guy. So storage companies have done a great job, storage companies, backup companies, in supporting the Ansible framework as an example, so that DevOps people can configure their own storage and do things without losing the data. So those are things that you need to do to re-architect from a system perspective. Yes, you need to integrate with the cloud for certain workloads, but for other workloads, large enterprise accounts in particular are basically cloning what they see in the public cloud and making their own private cloud look like the public, doing the right thing so DevOps people can get it without screwing up the data, which is a huge issue and has happened many times, even some that have leaked out publicly. And of course, the storage guy got fired, even though it wasn't their fault. So if people do the right thing from an architecture perspective, again, as I said early on, everything changes constantly. Storage is constant change. And if you don't like constant change, you shouldn't be a storage admin, a storage VP. You shouldn't work at a storage vendor, because the one constant of storage is it's always changing. And I don't mean just capacity and performance. Everything about it changes exponentially, nonstop, every 4 to 5 years. It isn't even a 10-year cycle. It's changing, which, by the way, for those people who work in the storage industry, means it's friggin' fun. And that's why. But if you're not a change person, you don't like change, shouldn't be in the storage business.
Hey, Dimitri, I want to just add to what one of the things which Eric was saying. The thing is that which I see, normally we would think public government, federal government would be one of those last one to go to the cloud and things like that. Eric, I'll tell you, one of the surprising things for us was we worked with a lot of the federal government agencies and things like that. And it's amazing that the guys like in Army, Air Force, and all these guys, they are on the public cloud much faster than what we expected, to be completely honest. And it was a surprise to us, and I think that's something which is something they are adopting at a much more faster pace than we thought. So that's something we see right now.
And let's also shift a little bit. The number one or most important thing when you are having a conversation about storage, and this comes up often, it's security. Is it secure? So the question is, I guess, what's the biggest challenge nowadays that businesses face when it comes to storing data securely? Asan, why don't you kick us off with that particular response?
Yeah, good segue to this topic. We talk about storage architecture, and one of the biggest threats prevalent today, which none of us like the term, but it is there. It's going to happen. We continuously get attacked as ransomware and other, of course, malicious security threats which have not gone away. Accidental data loss, user errors. So loss of data, to hackers, to system failures, to disasters. This is always going to be a threat. As data grows, as the value of the data grows, the threat gets even bigger and bigger, right? So having both the data protection and your data resilience architected in your entire IT infrastructure is so important now, that you're able to preserve data, prevent access, unauthorized access to it. And in those worst case situations where something bad does happen, then are you able to recover? Are you able to recover back to data which you can rely on, which has maintained its integrity, it's not been altered, not been modified? So I think these threats are prevalent today, and they're just going to get even more and more important. To the CISO, to the CEO of the company, we've seen high-profile threats and impacts. Colonial Pipelines is a good example, where a section of the population was impacted because of such a threat, and getting back from that state, getting the data back, getting the systems up and running was ever so important to the entire nation.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Asan. Doron, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. It's a very interesting topic. And, a few years ago, the idea of even talking to a CISO about storage and backup security just wasn't on their radar. I think ransomware has pushed storage, backup, and recovery back onto the IT agenda and the corporate agenda as well. We've seen some of the celebrities within the ransomware world, like Revil, Hive, Conti, Deadbolt. They've been making waves recently, and some of their tactics are to bypass the production systems altogether and go straight after backup and recovery. And so it's not surprising that the cyber insurance firms, the regulators, they're paying much closer attention to the integrity, the resiliency, and recoverability of organizations' data. And I want to say one more thing, which is really interesting. I as part of the CISO point of view video, I interviewed Jim Brady. Jim Brady is a CISO of a large healthcare provider. And he told me something really shocking. I'm going to read it out to you, which was, in his words, we have a daily average of 1,121,000 attacks per day, which they are blocking and stopping. Let's think about that for a second. The number of attacks happening has gone through the roof. And so they are keeping a close eye on every layer of IT, from the network to the storage and backup environments. And so it's very much on people's radar now, both the IT or the infrastructure department, as well as the security folks as well.
Awesome. That's a great point. And you call them ransomware celebrities? I never thought about that. So
unfortunately, they are, yes.
Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, let me chime in a little bit here. So one, while I do think there is definite progress, as Doron talked about, it's not there yet. There are plenty of CISOs and plenty of CIOs that don't realize that just look at the articles all over in the IT publications. Yes, periodically they talk about backup. They talk about maybe primary storage arrays, maybe purpose-built backup appliances, but the volume is on applications, servers, and the edge. Yet every stitch of data sits on storage, big, medium, or small company. So they're not bringing enough into the conversation. While I agree with Doran, it's becoming more prevalent. If you don't have storage included in your corporate cybersecurity strategy, you are leaving a huge gap. And as you know, it's not if you'll be attacked, it's when. And as Doran just pointed out, how often? In this case, that customer told him 1 million times a day. So they're going to get through. And when they get through, the storage gets attacked. Primary storage, secondary storage, archive storage. If I was the smart cyber criminal, and I'm not, I would be attacking the archive and backup data first. Otherwise, the CIO can say, hey, can we just get yesterday's backup? So it's not that the cyber criminals aren't too smart. They are smart, and they realize that just getting primary storage or secondary storage isn't the thing. And by the way, we haven't even talked about the malware, or if you will, the country by country attacks that we've been seeing lately, where the goal is to destroy the data. So, you can't power the houses and things like that. So I do think that it is getting better, but it's not where it needs to be. And storage is still left out of too many conversations at the CISO and the CIO level. And the articles in the press, IT press, reflect that. Yes, we're included sometimes, but overall storage is the stepchild to the servers, the applications, and the edge. And many articles that are all about cybersecurity don't even talk about storage, not even one time. And so it's getting better, but it's still not where it needs to be.
Yeah, and you know what? Before I'll hold my comment. I'll let Subbiah jump in here because this is a hot topic. Go ahead and.
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to add to what the conversation, which was actually Doran and Eric made, the key thing is that absolutely customers have to keeping the data, backup data safe. Absolutely critical thing. That's one of the reasons I constantly encourage customers to recommend that they constantly do either a worm target, worm-based backup, or protect their backup data with worm, or at least keep it air-gapped. That's there. But I think a bigger thing is also very important, which is, the entire access control for the system. It's so important. Sounds simple, but very few people actually even remember to do that. They do all the special things, but they don't actually make sure the network security is set right for the storage. That's the big part. That's the first one. The second thing I will tell you is that we constantly encourage customers, the people who have access to your data, access to this one, it's better to leverage one of the cloud identity management providers solution. In the cloud, use the native IAM. And we strongly tell people, never give your passwords or credentials to somebody else, right? You got to use always the native APIs because the cloud vendors spend millions and millions of dollars just having hundreds of people just focusing on security. So leverage their capability. That's something there. Same thing if you look at on the on-prem, there are people like Okta and Ping and Microsoft AD who spend tons of money, try to leverage that to make it even more secure.
Awesome. And Justin, you feel like chiming in here?
Yeah, I was smiling when Eric was talking because humans in general have a very difficult time imagining something happening to them. I like to say the time when people are most concerned about backup is right after they've lost data. And when people are most concerned about ransomware protection is when they've just suffered a ransomware attack. So timing's unfortunate. The other thing is that as like was just said, looking at backup environments that may have air-gap data or that are immutable data, but that's half the equation. The other part is people are very focused on how do I protect my data, but you also need to be really concerned about how you restore your data. And in the case of ransomware, especially where you can lose a huge amount of data, you may have a viable backup, you may have a viable copy of that, but if you can't restore it in days or weeks, then it's actually not that helpful in terms of coming back online. So a major focus when people think about how do I protect myself from losing data in a ransomware attack is not just how do I protect the data, it's how do I then restore it? How do I get back online? And that's much more a business continuity conversation. But now restore times is an even larger consideration point when people are looking at business continuity.
Justin, I want to add to what you just said, right? I mean, it's the restorability is absolutely a great point you mentioned. It's such a critical thing for the customers to have to constantly test and make sure they can recover the data. And the big thing here, which I always tell customers, is that one is recovery. They say, oh, I have tested recovery. Yeah, but do you think you will have enough infrastructure, secondary infrastructure, to be able to bring it up and running and test it, right? It's just not about the storage. It's also about the compute and how do you make sure you have enough space, protection capacity to test it out, and the speed at which you can recover. That's why I think the public cloud really helps too. That's something customers have to look at the whole equation there to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, and to add to both Justin and Subhaya, I think the evolvement we're seeing of what's being called as cyber resilience as a service, which is basically extending what previously was just disaster recovery as a service, where vendors and providers could allow options for customers to recover quickly with scalable, elastic compute and storage requirements. And now an essential element that's coming into this entire as a service offering is not just about how quickly and how fast the size of data, but is the data good? Is it hygiene? Is the forensics been able to run on it? Are we sure that there's nothing hidden? We know for a fact that malware like ransomware can hide in your network, in your storage systems, dormant for days or weeks before it scours and attacks your backups and other storage. But when you're actually doing a recovery, are you setting yourself up for failure again? Because another fact of the ransomware, the cybersecurity industry, is those who get attacked once are often repeat targets, because to the hackers, they're easy targets. They have paid up before, they have some weakness in their system which was exploited, and they'll try and re-exploit that. So ensuring resilience through the recovery process is also another important aspect, which I think is recovering, and we'll see more evolvement in the cyber resilience as a service solutions and offerings in the years to come, as the threat of ransomware becomes more prevalent. And to Eric's point, the realization becomes more real for many people.
Yeah, and that's always a great topic, and everyone has lots of great information to add when we start having conversations about ransomware. And Eric, just so you know, I used to be a backup administrator, and so don't pick on me for being a backup administrator. And that was a long time ago, by the way. But one thing that I want to let the listeners know is that one simple thing that you can do in order to make sure ransomware does not come and attack or infect your backup system is something simple. Rename the backup server. Do not name the backup server, because hackers and bad guys, they are looking for specific naming conventions on servers in order to specifically encrypt the data that those particular backup servers are actually hosting and protecting all the other systems in that environment. So one thing that I want to do is I want to shift a little bit slightly over to compliance and regulations, and that always seems to be a really huge topic as well. There are tons of acronyms around GDPR and HIPAA, PCI DSS, Sarbanes-Oxley, and the list goes on. What are some of the most important things or regulations or compliance regulations that customers have to deal with when dealing with data storage?
The regulatory environment is huge. Obviously, it impacts publicly traded companies the most, but it also impacts every government agency. For example, in the United States, there's a number of regulations put out last year around cybersecurity. And it was very clear those regulations were not just for the United States federal government, but for state government, local government, county governments, all the various government agencies. So regulatory and compliance is a huge issue. Public companies, number one, governments, number two. But even for private companies, you can be sued. So if you don't have the data in an immutable snapshot or some sort of immutable methodology, and if you're not archiving long enough, you could be hauled into court and that data can be used against you and you're losing. So you need to look at both the various laws, SEC, GDPR, all the various privacy issues that you have, anything clearly in the healthcare space and the pharmaceutical space, lots of regulation there all over the world. But you need to make sure that even if you're a small company, you can't think I'm immune, because you're not, because you can be hauled into court. Data needs to be provided. If you don't have immutable copies of that data or something to prove, unless you want to keep it all in paper still, which is not the trend clearly, you got to make sure you're protected. And all those regulations across the world. And by the way, for multinational companies, it's not just the company you're incorporated in, country you're incorporated in. It's not just about if you're a U.S. company. It doesn't matter that you're incorporated in California, Delaware, whatever state. It really matters where you're doing business. So you need to make sure, again, whether you're big, medium, or small, and even small companies sometimes do business overseas, you need to be careful what you do so you can have the right storage methodology to meet up with the regulatory and compliance issues and legal issues that you have if you aren't following the regulations or are not in compliance.
Awesome. And then Doron, would you mind adding to that?
Yeah, sure. Two things to add. One is we ran a survey beginning of this year, specifically to the financial services sector. One of the questions that came back was over 2/3 of the survey respondents said that the topic of storage and backup security was specifically addressed in external audits. And on that note, it's not surprising that we're seeing that the cyber insurance firms are demanding very, very strict compliance and are outlining things like, ransomware assessments on your storage backup data recovery. They're talking about you must have certain immutability capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So these are fairly new, where they are demanding that if you want cyber insurance, you need to meet these criteria. They're getting strict on this topic. And second thing is NIST. NIST came out with the special publication 800-209, which is called the Security Guidelines for Storage Infrastructure. This is really the Bible for all things storage security. I know that ISO are coming out in, I think, March or April next year with 27040, which is, again, dedicated to storage backup security. The last time they published this report was about 5-6 years ago. So we're starting to see a lot more of the industry standards produce reports and guidelines on this topic.
All right, Justin.
Yeah, and on the topic of regulatory compliance, there's privacy laws and other stuff now that organizations that store customer data have to wrangle with. And so between the California Privacy Act, GDPR, you have to be able to now also assess what kind of data that you've actually stored. So it's not just about storing the data, it's knowing what data you have. And in some cases, complying with erasing that data. And so the how dynamic these data protection environments are has really increased, because you have to not only, to Eric's point, be able to store and keep data and prove that you have it and prove the chain of custody, but you also have to be able to then, based upon a user request or a court order or something like that, be able to go and erase certain parts of data without affecting the rest of it. So it's very complex. It's a very difficult balancing act that organizations have to play between keeping the data and also not keeping the data that people don't want them to keep. It's almost a no-win situation.
And go ahead.
I just want to add one thing to some of the topics which was actually mentioned here. The key thing for customers is that the compliance needs actually obviously means the data has to be kept longer. One is for them to be able to sort through and shift through which data to keep and what not to keep. That's the first part. The second one is it also means that the data have to be kept longer. So they got to think of how to keep it, how to preserve it, how to keep it at a much more cost-efficient fashion. That's the other thing which actually leads to this whole conversation for customers. That's the other thing which we hear. The third thing I'll mention, Dimitri, is that a big part for these customers is that when they start using SaaS services, they got to realize that the responsibility is not just for the data they own, it's also the data which is on these different SaaS services as well as the backup services. So that's one of the reasons. If the data is in the customer control, the life is a lot better than actually when the data is actually spread across a lot more. So they got to plan for it.
Yeah, actually, I agree with all of that. And we seem to keep picking on Eric here, but one thing that I want to kind of bubble back up to the surface is automation and DevOps. Eric, you mentioned that a little earlier. And I'm really curious to hear from maybe a couple of you, or maybe even all of you, around the importance of automation, especially built into like a data storage subsystem or the data storage industry overall. And are you having conversations with customers around, the automation of processes and workflows, et cetera, as it pertains to data storage?
So actually, Demetrius, all the time.
Okay.
One of our number one value propositions, and we have 20 patents around this technology, is our machine learning AI-based capability of managing the storage on its own. We have a number of public references, whether they're our own or things that have been published, for example, in the Gartner Peer Insights, talking about how they've used our storage systems for 4 years, never touched it because it manages itself. We integrate, not only have AIOps technology built into our storage array, but we also integrate with third-party, what I'll call data center AIOps packages, VMware, Red Hat, ServiceNow. So we expose an API where we make that available. So in today's world, it's all about autonomous automation. Okay. If you point 3 new servers at our array, you don't need to do storage optimization, performance optimization, high availability or reliability optimization, which in the old days you had to do. And you could go into a nice, easy GUI that looked like a Mac OS, and that was easy to do. God forbid, way back when I first got into storage, when everything was command line. But the point is now they want it automated. You got to remember, if you go back to the economic upheaval of 2007, 8, and 9, IT was hit dramatically. By 2012 or 13, that economic travail was over. IT was back up. But if you open up the envelope and look inside of it, the number of storage admins is not even constant to what it was back then. Yet storage, as you talk to all the analyst firms, IDC, Gartner, and just customers, is growing exponentially. So the average storage admin is managing 10, 15 times the data, an average storage admin did in 2007 and 8, yet there aren't a bunch of storage admins. So this autonomous automation, making everything easy to use, and basically the storage running itself is a critical factor that all storage companies and all storage software companies, whether you're a system company or a storage software only company, has to deal with, because it's now a checkbox item. No one buys a car without a spare tire unless you have a James Bond car. But other than that, you get a spare tire. It's a checkbox item, right? And now having this automation is a checkbox item, and people do make decisions because not only does it make it easier to use, it dramatically impacts their operational expenses and their IT manpower needs. And that's a critical issue in today's environment.
Awesome. All great points, Eric. Thank you for that answer. Doron, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a lot of market noise regarding all things automation, machine learning, and AI. That being said, automation continues to be top of mind for companies. And I think the most successful organizations are selective with their automation initiatives, and they tend to prioritize areas that either accelerate storage adoption, increase reliability, or improve security. So I think automation can be used to great effect to continually evaluate the status of storage infrastructure security in order to proactively address risks, and also being able to automate the remediation of security risks as well. So I like to map the topic of automation to security. In fact, I was reading a recent SANS Institute report that talked about the time and resource intensive methods for threat hunting. And one of was 2 interesting findings. One was 73% reported a single alert investigation could take hours or even days. And 53% said they used 3 or more data sources to get to the bottom of an investigation. So I think when it comes to security and identifying vulnerabilities or misconfigurations, this is where automation can really be used to great effect.
Awesome. Completely agree there. Subbiah, you want to add something?
Yes, Demetrius. I want to add to what Eric and Doron said. I mean, as Eric was pointing out, the key thing is that people like to set and forget, right? I mean, like what the thing is that you set it up storage. You was talking about a customer running for 4 years without any of this one. Good thing I think that all the storage vendors have done a great job is actually integrated with the stack above them. They made sure it's easy for them to integrate into the stack, into the application stacks, into the orchestration stacks and things like that. They made it a lot more easier. That's one of the reasons when we think of how to simplify customers thing, like all of us would agree, automation is something we all constantly evolve on. The big thing is that how do you make it simple for the customer, under the cover, do the right things, try to optimize, find the right storage, find the right targets, try to use the storage efficiently, try to leverage the power of the platform capabilities like the snapshots, the clones, the replicas, things like that. That is something I think, so it's just not the creation of the storage, it's the entire lifecycle management as well as leveraging the intelligence in the platform. That is the most important thing. I think customers are better served for whatever stack they look at, be it a backup, be it archiving, be it a replication technology. Make sure it leverages the power of the platform you have chosen. Whichever storage on-prem or whichever storage in the public cloud, it should leverage the whole functionality, and that's the best thing for the customer.
Another area I'd like to add to follow Subaya's comment is, I think we talked initially a lot about on-premise versus cloud storage, and in cloud, which gives a lot of flexibility for storage, we see different tiers, right? Let's take AWS, for example. You have your standard S3, you have infrequent access, you have Glacier, Deep Archive. Now, each storage provides a different level of resilience, a level of recoverability, right? So optimizing this lifecycle to have AI, machine learning built in, which can then understand the nature of your data, where what should go, so that you can leverage the advantages of cost efficiencies, scale efficiencies. So all this can be driven by a lot of development that's happening in machine learning, which can understand not just the writes and reads on the data, but the context-aware decision making, which can drive both efficiencies in terms of cost and in terms of resilience of the data that you have, whether it's on-prem in a private cloud or in a public cloud.
I think one of the things also when we're talking about automation and we're talking about integration into applications is the rate of change within infrastructure is what's driving a lot of the need for this automation. So if we think back, 10 years with the big adoption of virtualization in on-prem data centers, or it's more than 10 years now, but that was driving especially a lot of storage vendors to think, how can we make our systems more dynamic? How can we enable integration into the virtualization platforms? And then the public cloud, and specifically with Kubernetes and containers, that's sort of driving that to the next level. So Eric earlier mentioned, virtualization was a big driver, and now it's containers. I think containers is a huge driver both in the public cloud and on-prem. That's one of the promises of containers, is that portability. That's really driving a lot of innovation in automation and autonomous operation of storage systems.
All right. All fantastic points. And I know we are getting really close to the end. So I really love to ask a super simple question. And it's not a trick question, but it is around, if you had 1 minute with the CISO, maybe you're catching an elevator, you were at AWS reInvent or some huge conference, you have an opportunity to have a brief conversation with a CISO or a CIO. What would you say to the CIO as it pertains to data storage?
So I'm happy to jump in. I'd probably ask 3 very quick and very simple questions. Question number 1 is to the CIO, are you using some sort of vulnerability management solution today to detect any security risks across your network, OS, endpoints, etc.? I'm sure the answer for 99.9% of the cases will be, of course we are. The follow-up question would be, are you also doing the same for your storage and backup? And either they'll say, I have no idea, or they'll say no. And the third follow-up question is, aren't you interested in knowing and having your eyes and ears over your storage and backup environment to understand how at risk this layer is? Because if you're scanning every other layer of IT, doesn't it make sense to also provide the same kind of level of protection for your storage and backup systems? And I would leave it at that.
All right.
Excellent discussion, gentlemen. Thank you all for your time and expertise for the last 60 minutes or so. Before we leave, I would like to invite each of you to give us a quick 30 seconds or less self-promo if you want to promote your solution, website, blog, anything you'd like. The floor is yours, and we will start with Demetrius.
Awesome. So I really enjoyed this conversation and also wanted to just put a plug in for the Data Protection Gumbo podcast. I've had over 170 episodes that I've published, and I've had hundreds of conversations with C-level executives and founders. I also have a backup and recovery LinkedIn group as well, backup and recovery professionals. We just reached a milestone yesterday. We crossed 25,000 members. So I'm really excited about that milestone as well. And also just looking forward to seeing where 2023 takes us around some of the innovation that's going to happen in the data protection, backup recovery, and storage industry. So thanks again. And I appreciate the opportunity to moderate here today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for agreeing to moderate. Justin, you're up next.
Thanks very much. Thanks to Solutions Review for having me, and thanks to all of the other panelists. Pure Storage, if you want to learn more about our data protection solutions, you can visit us at purestorage.com/data protection. And if you'd like to learn more about some of our products, the one I work with specifically with is FlashBlade, which you can learn more about at purestorage.com/FlashBlade. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Dorn, final thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Go and check out continuitysoftware.com. We've got a product called Storage Guard that provides continuous protection of all storage and backup environments. So if you're interested in just understanding how secure your storage and backup systems are, come and check it out. We also have a great report across the industry that talks about the industry benchmarks as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Eric, quick 30 seconds self-promo.
Well, first thing, like to thank everyone for attending. However they attended on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, for listening in to a bunch of storage mavens talk about how important storage is, how cool it is, and why storage is so important to their enterprises and all size companies, big, medium, and small. Like to thank you. If you need anything, please reach out to me. I'm Zoggin Store on Twitter. We've got about 300,000 followers on LinkedIn, so please follow me. And again, thank you very much. www.infinidat.com.
Thank you. Subaya.
Thank you very much. First up, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with hear out the rest of the panelists, as well as for the time the customers have spent. I'm from a company called Hyku, HYCU, Hyku. For you to try out a multi-cloud data protection solution that is simple and keeps your data secure always keeps it under your control, give it a try at tryhyku.com, Hyku.com. Like the Japanese poetry, we try to keep things simple, but very intelligent, and that's something which we deliver. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but not least, Ashan.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak to you about this very interesting topic. From arcserve.com, we're a data protection solutions provider. Where you're looking for immutable storage, air gap, offline, data protection as a service, DR as a service. We've got the full bouquet of solutions, regardless of your business size, nature of business, where you're located in the globe. Check out arcserve.com for the variety of solutions, cost-effective and reliable solutions, which you can always fall back on any day. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, that will do it for this topic. If you're watching live, please stick around. We'll be right back with our next group of experts to discuss data access versus compliance and the future of cloud data protection. For Solutions Review, my name is Jonathan Paula. Thank you again to our group of panelists, and thank you for watching. We hope to see you next time.